And there goes my hat. Okie pokey weirdos, I'm Rev, and have you met my son? He's lacking a face at the moment, but that's what this video is for. I also want to cosplay a number of characters from Owl House, so I am creating his Hooty Owl House backpack so that I can carry him around. He's also a very long boy, so we need lots of room for him to wiggle, because he's my favorite danger noodle. And welcome to my world of cosplay shenaniganery. My first step was figuring out how big I was going to make this thing, because it would dictate just about everything else. I traced a bowl and a dinner plate and tried to figure out which would be most proportional to how he is sized in the show. After deliberating with my sibling, we agreed on the larger size. Next, I washed my fabric because I did get it from a thrift store, and then I started cutting out samples because I realized this fabric was way too light of a color to be Hooty's body. Time for practice dye tests. First I tested it with some RIT dye, and while that was soaking I moved on to seeing if I could save this vinyl that I'd painted forever ago and never used, because it really would have been helpful to have more of this bright red fabric for the roof. So I went with some acetone to see if I could save it, and look at that, it's coming right off. Amazing. And with this being so long, I'm gonna get a nice long noodle without having to have a seam in it, which is really nice. Ugh. And we're doing 28 inches because his face circumference is about 7, so we want 1 inch of seam allowance. This fabric ended up being about 15 feet long. Even just the fabric moving is very Hooty. It just keeps going. Hooty is slightly shorter than that because I needed more of the length for some details, as well as seam allowance. Come hither. We've got the dye tests here. This is the original fabric. We got 5 minutes, 15 minutes, and a half hour. These are still slightly darker than what they would actually be because they're still damp, but there is not as big of a difference between these two as I would hope. So I'm going to try dyeing it with tea next and see how that does. Then I measured out the size of my daily backpack to get a gauge of what I normally carry around to make sure that Hooty's backpack isn't too much larger. 10 and 14. Next up was to make a mock-up of this backpack out of poster board so I would have a good reference for how big this thing was actually going to be. Let's see. Still need enough room to put his drawer right here. A little higher, because we gotta fit the little green swirlies in there too. Put his little drawer right here. Drawer stand in, and the green swirls. Good deal. Okay. And his little heart right there. We'll bump up the line for the gray just a little more. Nope, still crooked. Now I need to figure out the width of this thing. The tea did a little something more, but it's still not dark enough. So I'm going to add some black and some red to the brown dye. More red, just a teeny tiny bit of black to make it darker and get me the right color. Here goes everything. The difference in color was still not where I wanted it, so I went with another dye bath. After comparing all the tester pieces again, I remembered that the darkest one was the one that stayed in the tea bath the longest, so guess what we're using? Finally, the color contrast was getting somewhere, but it still wasn't enough of a difference for me. Let's move on to the poster board and see if I can make a decision later. We have our mock-up, and it's looking pretty good. It's a decent size. I like it. So let's move on to EVA foam. I heated up with the heat gun to get it to lay out flat, and now I'm going to attempt to use my diamond wheel cutter for my Dremel for the very first time. This thing absolutely terrifies me. It is a power tool and I do not want to lose my fingers, so I'm going to go very slowly and carefully with this. However, for the video I sped it up, so you won't have to look at it forever. The Dremel cutter worked out perfectly, so I'm going to be tracing and cutting out every single piece for the house. Oh, that's crooked. Why is it crooked? I lined it up earlier. There they are. They're not perfect, they're not pretty, but that was not the idea. I just wanted to get these cut out as quickly as possible. I am going to sand them to get some of the really nasty bits off. Otherwise, these are just a base, and I'm not too worried about them looking absolutely fabulous. Time for sanding. Remember your face covering and gloves. Because the cutting and dremeling left all the little fuzzies on the foam, I went ahead and wiped it down with a damp cloth. I burnt the foam right there. Luckily, nobody will see it. To put a sealant coat on this EVA foam after heat sealing it, I used massive rings of masking tape, taped them down to cardboard so that the wind couldn't take off with them, and then sprayed them down with clear spray paint. Alrighty, back to this fabric. Because I couldn't get the color I wanted in the body, I thought maybe I could get the color I wanted in the face by using my airbrush. First, the airbrush spilled. Luckily, the fabric washed out, and then I could get to work. I was airbrushing in the garage last night, and my air compressor, Jasper, had to go in the timeout bucket because he was trying to run underneath the car and made me spill my paint. Shame on you, Jasper. Sadly, the airbrush still wasn't getting me the color I wanted, and the fabric was starting to get crusty with how many layers I was putting on there. So we're gonna have to move on to something else. So I have another idea for his face, because I went digging through my fabric scraps and found something. That is vinyl that I thrifted a couple years ago. Nobody was buying it because it's got all these weird imperfections where it looked like a Sharpie exploded in somebody's fabric bin, because I have a number of other fabrics that I got at the same time with this issue.
However, it will work for this because I just need a little bit for 2 faces. I was going to use it as a lining for his face anyway to help hold open the danger noodle part. But here's what we got. This is the original color. Really close, but this is a little brighter. That's what I airbrushed. That is not the color I'm going for. And this is the dyed fabric. Looks a lot darker against this than either one of these. So we're gonna go with this for his face. I think it needs to be a little bigger. Yeah, a little longer at the sides. So, got a scrap from the body. Just gonna extend this a little bit more. And then can fold that in half. Moment of truth. Haha!
Then I decided to hand sew the outer edge of the noodle to the face so that I would have an easier time sewing, and once I got it under the machine, it wouldn't fight with me. Contact cement time! Use your safety mask! I always like to glob out a big pile of the contact cement and then use a scrap piece of foam to dab it onto the edges of my whole project. That way each side has time to get tacky while I'm working on other pieces. And all pieces got hot glue reinforcement down in the inside corners.
This is my Moko Moko, my fluffy fuzzy that I wear for Sashomaru. But I've said in my Sashomaru video that I wanted to replace it, make myself a new one that is actually fluffy, because this one is made out of a thrifted blanket that is lightly fuzzy. I'm going to take the stuffing out and wash this, put the stuffing in Hooty, as well as this will go down the center of Hooty, so his body has some girth without it actually being stuffing. It'll just be the blanket fuzz so that he has a little bit of innards in the middle. And I hot glued this in shut, so that's why we're cutting it open. Easier, quicker. Work smarter, not harder. And reduce, reuse, recycle. I am gonna stick this in the wash since it's been drug around on the ground at cons and at school, especially since I've had this costume since 2016. You can tell which stuffing is originally from this bag and which stuffing is from the Moko Moko. That's because most of this is from my dog gutting stuffies over the years. Now that I have the house base structure almost done, there's only one thing I don't like about it, is in the front. This corner extends way too far past the front facing panel. So I'm going to peel this apart and whittle down this panel and then re-glue this side so that we don't have this big corner sticking out off of the main face of the structure. And you might notice I didn't put the other half of the roof on. That's because I'm going to make this part hinged so that I can get him down inside this without having to shove him into this hole. He will have his face pulled through this hole and the rest of his body will be shoved down through here. This is the white vinyl I'm going to be covering the house in, so I do not have to paint it, but it's full of all these crease lines, so I gotta iron it first.
If you noticed, I'm using a lot of thrifted or scrap fabrics because this was a stash busting project. Even the EVA foam was scraps left over from making swords and armor.
This vinyl was thrifted, so it's got some weird imperfections like this on there, I'm gonna see if acetone can rub that out. It did lighten it a little, but it's not gonna take care of it, sadly.
To get all the vinyl attached to all the EVA foam pieces, I slathered each EVA foam piece in Mod Podge and then hot glued it around the edges and tacked down the vinyl. The hot glue gives it an initial stick, and then the Mod Podge will give it an official stick once that dries. To clean up all the edges where the vinyl wasn't covering, I painted them with acrylic paint. Mixing it with Cosflex so that the paint would be a little more flexible.
Crap, come on. Just randomly dropped glue wherever it wants.
For the roof, I wanted one side to be hinged so that I could pop that open and get Hooty in and out of the backpack without having to use the teeny tiny hole in the front of the house. This meant making a flap of fabric that wasn't completely attached so that it could fold and move with the hinge of the roof. And I know some people are going to be worried about all the hot glue going on here right now. I'm fabric gluing it later. The hot glue is for an initial stick. Next up is the backpack straps. I measured out my own straps on my daily backpack to figure out how long I usually have my backpack straps. However, I did make these straps slightly longer since I'm going to be wearing various cosplays with it, and I want to be able to fit thick clothing under those straps. Because I didn't have any dark green vinyl, I cut this out of black scrap vinyl and then painted it dark green, mixing that acrylic paint with fabric medium, which is heat activated, therefore making the fabric green without making it super crusty. And I didn't want to iron the vinyl, so I tapped it with a heat gun. And this took multiple layers. And the roof has these little brown reinforcement pieces here, so I started making those out of scrap foam.
I made these bits, but I didn't take into account how thick the foam is. Okay, that worked better than I was expecting. I was afraid I was going to break it. I was thinking I was going to have to use this really thin, cheap kids craft foam just to smooth things over so there's not this major gap when I put fabric over this. And I wanted to show that I have a bunch of iterations of Osmodeus mouths in these scraps. Shows how old all these scraps are. Because of the thickness, I do have to cut off the excess. And thank you, Sable, for cutting these out for me. I have been avoiding cutting out pieces for this project because I sprained my wrist, but I really want to get this project done now. So I'm just dealing with scissors so it hurts less, and Sable helped me cut things out with an X-Acto knife. Thank you, thank you. They're little chairs, little thrones that I'm going to cover in faux leather.
The brown pegs also gave me a perfect place to put my magnets so that the hinged roof could be closed and stay closed while I'm walking around at conventions.
Wow. Gravity. Oh my god, gravity. Stop.
Alrighty, let's finally get to Hooty's face. I'm putting two faces on this because there'll be one at either end, so I thought I'd play with some fun designs. Next was to get the backpack straps attached. After measuring out all of my placements for the holes, I used a knitting needle to impale the vinyl and foam to get 4 holes per strap. Then I zip tied and reinforced each attachment with fabric glue on each strap.
And that's the wrong direction. I did that the wrong. Now I have to go get scissors and do it the right direction.
Because the magnets were only put on with hot glue at first, they weren't staying attached to the vinyl. They stuck to the foam just fine, but I needed to put a piece of felt attached with fabric glue over the magnets, A, to lighten the grip because they did not like letting go of each other, and B, to keep the magnets that are attached to the vinyl.
Trying to get on both the vlogging camera and the live stream. It's a little difficult.
Then I hand sewed his second face on. Machine stitched both faces on.
And I have to pull the fabric tight so that there's no puckering. Last bit of polyfill for the face with the eye patch. Alrighty. That is that face stuffed. This used to be my Moko Moko. It is now a plush blankie sleeve and I have washed it. Now it goes in the hole. I also don't want his middle to be super stuffed anyway, because he needs to be able to fit into his birdhouse. And if I have him completely stuffed with polyfill and he's super chunky, then he won't fit in his birdhouse. For Porta Hooty, firstly, put his butt in there. He doesn't really have a butt, but that's okay. Stuff him in there. And then he has a hole for his face down in front here, so I gotta pull him through. But otherwise, I have Porta Hooty reporting for duty.
I attached some Velcro to the center so that I could easily insert more polyfill if need be, and then ladder stitched it shut.
That's one of me, and two of me, and not quite three of me, up to my chest. So not quite 15, it's probably more like 13. Coiling him around me.
And I guess that means we are now at the official reveal.
Smush! Well, that's a problem. Of course, it has to break during the reveal. And that is how I've made Hootsuper and his little birdhouse backpack. I greatly appreciate it if you've made it this far into the video, because those watch hours are super important, so please also share this video with another one of your favorite weirdos. And remember those subs, comms, thumbs, and a ding. And Ida's wig is going to be a massive undertaking, so please help support me on Patreon and Ko-fi. And welcome to the madness. This hat, man. There we go. Nope. Doesn't want to stay on my head. Percy, no crying. I took you out already. Have you met my son? He's lacking a face at the moment, but that's what... Oh my god, the hat. I can't hold all of it all at the same time. Holy crap. Stop. Oh my god, if this hat could stay on my head, that would be great. So, I have
and the air vent kicks on and moves my backdrop. I'm going to scream. No heat. Turn off.
Now I have to wait for this to turn off.